More clashes with Iranian-backed Houthis in the Red Sea. A U.S. destroyer shot down 3 drones in self-defense yesterday.
Meanwhile, Israel is accelerating its campaign in southern Gaza. As Chris Mitchell reports, the IDF is operating under military conditions set by the United States.
Tensions escalating in the Middle East as Iranian-backed Houthi rebels hit 3 commercial ships in the Red Sea with ballistic missiles. A U.S. warship patrolling the region shot down 3 Houthi drones in an hours-long engagement. There were no injuries, but the U.S. is vowing to consider all appropriate responses. IDF chief spokesman Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari says the military is expanding the ground offensive to all areas of the Gaza Strip, and that wherever Hamas operates, Israel will find them. Israel's Channel 12 reports U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, in his recent visit, linked American military support to certain conditions, including proving the IDF plans to take into consideration the civilian population, reduce civilian evacuations from their homes to a minimum, and provide more safe areas for non-combatants. Speaking in the Middle East, Vice President Kamala Harris taking a critical tone.
Too many innocent Palestinians have been killed.
Representing a group of Democrat senators, Vermont's Bernie Sanders said they're done asking nicely and called on the Biden team to use its substantial leverage with Israel to make sure it reduces civilian casualties in Gaza. Israel came up with a solution, publishing an online map to facilitate evacuations from areas where Hamas is illegally operating in civilian areas.
And we're going to continue making efforts to get civilians out of harm's way from areas where Hamas is trying to hide behind them, because there will be nowhere to hide for the Hamas terrorists who perpetrated the October 7th massacre and have ever since been promising to perpetrate repeat atrocities against our people. Those are legitimate military targets, and we will do everything we can to get civilians out of harm's way so that we can reach those targets.
Blinken also reportedly set a timetable for Israel to finish the job in weeks. Israel's ambassador to the UK pushed back.
We speak on reality on the ground. It took the Americans 9 months in Mosul to dismantle ISIS capabilities when there was no underground tunnel city. This is much more complicated than Mosul.
The IDF says it has destroyed 500 of the 800 tunnel shafts it's uncovered that Hamas built near schools, kindergartens, playgrounds, hospitals, mosques, and civilian homes. The underground city extends for hundreds of miles and houses large quantities of weapons, serving as one of Hamas's most strategic assets in its war against Israel. On Saturday night, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed total victory.
We will continue the war until we achieve all its goals, and it's impossible to achieve those goals without the ground operation.
Netanyahu also rejected the U.S. proposal that the Palestinian Authority take over Gaza after the fighting. Critics point out that the PA still has not condemned the October 7th attacks and is supporting terrorists in the West Bank. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, Jeff Ballabon is Senior Counsel for International and Government Affairs at the American Center for Law and Justice. He joins us now from our Jerusalem bureau. So tell us about the Biden administration here. They're talking about a revitalized Palestinian Authority taking over Gaza, as well as governing a potential Palestinian state. What's the implications for Israel in that scenario?
Thanks, Gordon. I'll just say this. God forbid, even before the horror of October 7th, there was extremely broad consensus in Israel that a so-called two-state solution is an absurdity. There's no evidence that any sector of Palestinian society disavowed that atrocity or the goal of total genocide. And since then, since October 7th, it's become clear that the entire Palestinian population in Gaza and in Judea-Samaria, what the world likes to call the West Bank, embraced, even celebrated October 7th. Those very few voices in polls now who say that they don't support it don't appear to not support it because they're opposed to genocide, but for strategic or tactical reasons. And Gaza is far less of a threat than handing control of Judea and Samaria to these genocidal terrorists. This is a dead-on-arrival concept.
There's some talk of Jordan taking over the West Bank. Is that serious talk, or is that just speculation?
Well, I haven't heard that here, Gordon, but, you know, the whole creation of Transjordan, which then became Jordan, let's go do a little quick history. You know, about 80% of what was known as the Jewish national home, the mandate for Palestine, was given to create this Arab nation, which was supposed to be the safety valve. That was supposed to take care of this problem. And of course, they ousted all of their Jews. Israel didn't oust its Arabs, and Israelis' Arab citizens very much contribute and are part of the culture. But it's this leftover group that now is called Palestinians. It wasn't called Palestinians then, but since the 1960s called Palestinians. You know, this is a terrible, cynical game of blackmail. The reality is that Jordan keeps on denying their responsibility. They should have responsibility. Instead of talking about the East Bank of the Jordan, and they refer to, or the West Bank rather, we should talk about the East Bank, which was the Jews' land. They should be taking responsibility. Israel doesn't feel, apparently, that they can push that internationally. I think they should.
Well, the administration, some Democrat senators are now talking about strings on military aid to Israel. How will this affect Israel's ability to destroy Hamas?
Well, that is definitely political blackmail. I mean, you see that the Secretary of State has been here multiple times. My sources are telling me that he's on the phone basically hourly. And it's a threat. The threat is Israel needs bunker buster bombs. Israel needs precision-guided weapons. Otherwise, we know what happens. More collateral damage, more dead Gazans, more soldier deaths, more IDF deaths. It's such a cynical ploy. Some suggest it's part of a ploy to actually oust the Prime Minister Netanyahu, toward whom Biden and the Democrats have expressed tremendous past hostility. Secretary of State Blinken has been doing this nonstop, and while Israel is extremely grateful for the support they are getting in public, in private, they're deeply, deeply concerned about the limitations. It will make it much more difficult to bring peace, much more difficult to achieve their goals. And these goals are necessary because it's Hamas, but also well beyond Hamas. We know that many of those who came over on October 7th were not Hamas. Many of those were so-called, quote, innocent civilians, unquote. Many of those were associated with the numerous other genocidal jihadi groups. And so this is a very serious situation that Israel knows threatens its very existence. What the Secretary of State, what the Biden administration is doing is, on the one hand, being somewhat helpful publicly, but privately making it very difficult for Israel to wage this war successfully.
Well, the UN has finally weighed in. It took them a long time to finally say that what happened on October 7th was horrific, and that it was specifically violence directed at women, that rape was used as a weapon of war. They're finally waking up to it, and just recently the prosecutor for the International Criminal Court has joined in saying that there were serious violations of international law. Do you expect Hamas to actually be charged with war crimes?
That's a great question. I don't know if Hamas will be charged with war crimes. What I do expect is another shoe to drop. The UN was essentially shamed into this by public calls and public shows that the massive, horrific attacks, the violations, which I don't even want to repeat because they're so ugly and so beyond barbaric. And it was just, they confronted the UN and said, how dare you not speak about this? I actually believe the reverse, Gordon. I believe that the UN, having been forced to acknowledge the evil of October 7th, will actually redouble its efforts to somehow blame Israel and claim that Israel is the worst player, because that's what they do. And let's not forget, we know that UNRWA employees, the UN organization that is supposed to take care of these refugees, sends billions of dollars and is raising them to be jihadis. He's raising them to want genocide. But we see more than that, that they seem to be providing support, not only their personnel, but also their institutions where their weapons are being hidden. So the UN itself really needs to be held to account for this by the American public, first and foremost, because America has a big influence on the UN when it wants to, because America provides a lot of the funding.
Well, we stopped the funding under the Trump administration. Biden put it back in, and the evidence seems to be quite clear that UNRWA was having Hamas terrorists on their payroll, which is one of those you've got to be kidding me moments where how can you ever do that? Let's talk about the Shema. The IDF is now playing the Shema over loudspeakers in Gaza and trying to encourage the remaining hostages. Why is this prayer so crucial?
Thanks, Gordon, for asking that question. I don't know if this is an official IDF policy or just soldiers did this on their own, but they did set up loudspeakers and started blasting. And they said they wanted to do it so that the hostages might hear them, because they don't know where the hostages are held. They're underground, they're in buildings. Maybe they'll hear them blasting it. And what I found so moving, Gordon, was that they didn't play the Israeli national anthem, Hatikva. These soldiers, and again, I don't know if it came down from above or they just did it on their own, they started playing the Shema prayer. Gordon, every morning, religious Jews, observant Jews say Shema. Every evening we say Shema. So we begin our day with and end our day with. The last thing we say at night, the first thing we teach our children, the rabbis teach us, and by the way, this is also, the Shema prayer is what Jews hope to have on their lips as they die. The rabbis teach us that this is what the tribes, Jacob's sons, said to him on his deathbed as he's dying, when he gives them their blessings and he tells them sort of what their future is going to be. They testify to him and say, no, Father, because remember, Jacob's name is Israel. So hear, Israel. The Lord our God, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. This is the testimony that the Jewish people say to the world. And you know, between Jacob, our father, and us, I think about this often, Gordon, there are only 140 or 150 generations. If you think about it, only 140 or 150 parents who passed this message on to their children. And now you see that this is what's being awoken. This is what October 7th has awoken in the Israeli populace. We see Israeli soldiers are wearing tzitzit, they're wearing the four fringes. Even if they say they're secular, they're wearing it as they go to war, besides their bulletproof vests. Israel has always struggled between its Jewish identity and its secular democratic identity. Now you see this in the streets, in the army. They're becoming more and more aware that all of these attacks are because we're Jews. Jews are treated differently, and they're responding by being ever more Jewish. It was so amazing that that's what they chose to broadcast in Gaza. Hopefully, some of those hostages were able to hear it. Hopefully it gave them hope to know that the children of Israel are fighting a war for them.
Well, I hope it also encourages everyone in Israel to stand together as one to resist this absolute evil. There aren't words to describe what happened on October 7th, other than the face of evil was revealed for the entire world to see. And we stand as one with you, with Israel, to say, yes, no more. Hamas should not exist anymore. Please be encouraged, no matter what you're hearing from the UN, from the International Criminal Court, or even from our own government here in America, we stand with you. Hamas has to go. Stand strong. We need to eliminate this evil. Jeff, thanks for joining with us, and thanks for all that you're doing.